Mr. Yontef, how are you doing? Thank you so much for taking my call.
How are you today? What's going on?
You are what's going on today. You are
It's
what's
all
going
about
on.
me.
Yes, it's all about you. You are my Sunday. You are God today. How are you, my love?
I'm doing well. Listen, I'm waking up. I'm having a late start to today in New York City. I'm having a cup of coffee. And, as
Mm,
long as I have my coffee, life is good.
that's fair. I am not necessarily late starting. I've been up very early this morning. I think it's just because out of nerves and out of anxiousness. I've been so ready to talk to you.
Oh my,
So I'm feeling good.
I'm excited to chat. What is going on?
Oh, the things are the things, all things housewives, cinematic universe, and whatever else goes on throughout reality TV.
Well, there's a lot going on now. It isn't there?
Absolutely. But before we dive into the shits, when did you fall in love with reality TV?
I mean, I was kind of right there from the beginning. The Hills, Laguna Beach, The Simple
Ah,
Life, like way before Housewives.
best
It
times.
just spoke to me. And like we all know now that it's not real, but do we really need to know that? You just get sucked into people's lives. So really, I think like Laguna Beach, The Simple Life, like that was kind of my gateway drug around that time.
I think for me, my obsession was somewhere at a cross between Road Rules and The Hills because I love the competition of Road Rules, but the cinematic drama and styling, like The Hills was shot like Melrose Place.
It was, yeah, and like I like the real world and all of that, but it really was, yeah. Laguna Beach and the Hills is when I really, and I don't know if you watch Selling Sunset. It's the same person that did the Hills and Laguna Beach. It's brilliant.
No wonder it's so popular.
It's
Aha.
brilliant. It feels the same way. It's shot the same way with the music and the drama, and it's just you're like, man, Adam DeVello is the one who does it. It's like you are just a genius. But yes, The Hills was just everything, right?
Yes, absolutely. I've been watching and listening to a lot of podcasts because there's a lot of the stars of the show that are going back and covering it now.
Totally.
And listening to Whitney Port and her husband watch the show and recap it is some of the most hilarious content on YouTube. I highly recommend.
They're all doing it. Like I had Adrena Patridge on my show right before she
Mhm.
started doing her podcast with Brody, and it's like it's just great. It's all great.
Kristen and I think Steven are doing a podcast about the hills right now.
Yup.
Shout out to them.
Shout
What
out
was
to them.
what was the moment, the episode, or the season that you knew that you had to create content about Bravo?
I feel like I knew it before I started doing it. It was one of these things where, because I was kind of friendly with a lot of these housewives. And so it was one of these things where it was like, what am I going to do with this? Like, I feel like I have an insider's perspective in a way. That's where the name Behind the Velvet Rope came up for my podcast, because it was kind of like I was hanging out with some of these people and it was like, oh, let me take you behind the velvet rope. So it was kind of like I knew for a while when I was kind of hanging in these circles that I should do something. I just didn't know what to do. Is it a blog? Is it this? Is it that? And then I'm like, well, maybe it's a podcast. And so that's kind of how I started my podcast. And I didn't really think it would become a thing. I really was just like, let me do this, see what happens. It was a thing before COVID, but then when COVID happened, I really doubled down. It was
Hmm.
like, wait a second. It was like, I have all this time. And that's when I really started reaching out to people. And a lot of people were saying yes to interviews. And that's when I just started having a ton of interviews. And that's when I kind of went from 2 days a week to 3 days a week. And now it's like a 5 day a week podcast. And I think through that, I realized like, listen, I'm a business person. It is all about business to me. At the end of the day, I'm like Bethany Frankel. And it just was like, no, I want this to be a business. Like, I'm not okay just chatting with these people and having fun, which more power to anyone that's the path they want to take. To me, it was like, this needs to become a business and I need to make money. And so I just went into beast business mode. And that's kind of how we are where we are today.
That touches me so heavily because I really, when I decided to do this podcast, I knew that I was going to go balls to the walls with it. And, one of the things that I'm most proud of with this show is that I produce it in the style of a talk show where I do release new shows 5 days a week, right? And so for me, it's all about the intention. So I want to lay the intention that like the talk space is where I want to end up. So me doing this podcast in the style of a talk show is showing you that I can produce or be in position to do the talk show when it comes my way. Do you get what I mean? So I love that you really took what you knew was going to be your passion project and made it into your paycheck in the same vein. Like that's 100% runs home with me.
It's kind of like the goal, right? It's kind of like everyone's goal is like everyone wants to really make money doing what they love to do, right?
They say that like if you are doing what you love for a living, then you'll never work a day in your life. And so far in doing this podcast, this is the first time, and I've been, trying to be in the entertainment industry for years. But this podcast is the first time that I've truly felt like I've loved what I'm doing, even though it's the most work that I've ever done at one time. Like I absolutely love what I'm doing. And that's the first time that phrase has ever really applied to me. It's like, oh, this really doesn't feel like work because I'm having the best time.
I mean, 5 days a week is no joke, right?
Not at all. Not at all. And it feels like 7 days a week because even on the weekends, you're still reaching out to people, still confirming interviews, still following up with things, still editing, still scheduling things, still doing this and that. But if you truly enjoy it, like it becomes just something you look forward to doing. Like I genuinely love waking up and working on my podcast every day. So it doesn't feel like I'm clocking into a job.
I mean, that's great, right?
100%. What's your ultimate goal as a podcaster or a content creator?
I mean, it's such a good question. I don't know. I feel like I want to grow every year. I have goals. I mean, and we can get into them, but at the same time, I feel like this year, which was my 3rd year, it's kind of like, because I had another business prior to this way back, which had nothing to do with this. And I ran it the same way that I run this, in the sense that like, I'm good. Like year 3 was like, wow. Now, of course, I want to grow. Of course, I have goals. Of course, I want to make more money. But, I feel like if this is it, if every year from now on is like this year, 2022, I'm okay. So it's almost like I have goals, but I don't want to get too cocky and too greedy, because I feel like in business, that's where people trip themselves up. So if next year is like this and I make the same amount of money and I have the same type of year, great. It's almost like this is the model year. Now, having said that, I mean, I'd like this to go on for a long time. I mean, I wouldn't mind doing TV. Like, but things are good. Things are really good. So I feel like I had goals and I kind of achieved them, and I guess I have other goals, but at the same time, the thing is kind of running itself now in year 3. And I'm just so busy that it's almost like, if these are the guests that are coming on, if this is the way it's working, like, don't look a gift horse in the mouth. I mean, I was worried about this year in January, and now I opened my eyes and it's November. It's just kind of happening. So if I have another year like that, where it just kind of all happens with some goals off to the side, that wouldn't be bad. It'd be another great year.
I absolutely love that. That sounds like a really sweet space to be.
It is. It is. It's like, and like, I think that's how business should work. It's like, year 3 should be easier than year 1, right? Like, so year 2 was
Hmm.
easier, and now it's year 3, and so, yeah, this is, like, a good space to be, and, of course, like, you're always open to ideas, and, like, I'm the type that I will listen to anything that is put in front of me, and if an opportunity presents itself, normally I say yes, because you never know, right?
Yeah.
Well, I'm just kind of like a yes person, but it's all kind of working now, and so it's like if this is it, this is I'm good.
So you're at a position where you're able to only say yes to something if it adds or supplements what you already have going on.
Yes. Like for instance, I just did our first ever Behind the Velvet Rope live show. I
Hmm.
have mixed feelings about doing a live show. I'm not opposed to it, but a lot of it, look, there's positives to it, but it's not like something I was looking for. I really didn't have the time at the moment. There's a lot of things going on, and it just kind of came to me, and this promoter and then City Winery, and they're like, look, we really, so it's like eventually, if you're still asking me after 3 weeks, sure. Now my answer is yes. Like, it wasn't really yes, but sure. Like, let's do this. So I'm not really one to say no to things, even if
Right.
I don't think it's the best idea. I'm just like, you know what? Like, if you ask me enough times, I'm like, maybe you know something more than I do. Let's go down this road. But yeah,
You
I mean,
wear me down.
technically, I feel like I don't. It's hard to explain. Like, I used to wake up with like, okay, like these are the goals for 3 months from now, and these are the goals from 6 months. Now that it's kind of happening, it's just like I'm in it. So it's not that there are no goals, but the goals are really just like, let's keep this train moving because this is a good train.
That's beautiful. Can you speak to the difficulty of getting TV personalities on for interviews?
Well, it's not easy. I mean, I think it, it's like anything else. Like, the bigger my show has gotten, the easier it's gotten. I mean, I
Mhm.
also have people that help. So I book people now a lot through people I know. I mean, I have a team of people that, well, not a team, I have somebody that reaches out for me. So, look, I think the more names you have, and that's why I don't want to be all Bravo, I don't want to be all Housewives. I
That's great.
really like the diversity because, so if I
Yeah.
want to reach out to a music person, it's kind of like a name. It's a name game. It's like, well, here are the other musical people I've had on. Great, you're an actress. Here are the actresses we've had on. You
Right.
and it works with housewives too. Like, oh wait, you had on, Vicky and Tamara and Countess Luann and Sutton and Crystal. You know what I mean? The more
Right.
big housewife names you mention, then people are. So it's the same with actresses and music, but there's really no rhyme or reason to it. That's another thing I've learned. Like, you could have a lesser known, smaller name person just not want to do it. And you're like, wait, but I had so and so. And it just, so, but it is a constant. It's not easy, but I think it gets easier when you have a name you can throw around. And now you have 4 names, and now you have 10 names that you've had on. It's kind of like a chain effect, a snowball effect where it just kind of all falls into place.
I totally relate to that. I think as I've been doing this podcast, I specifically reach out to content creators because I want to curate more, relatable conversations so that my listeners feel like they're just like watching the shows with us instead of like uh, being like starstruck. Like, I would love to have conversations with people who they can relate to. And so, as the different names that have come through, big or small, depending on where you're looking or, who the person is, it's definitely made getting people on easier or whatever based on who's been on, and the more interviews that I have on, the easier it is for people to feel comfortable coming on, which is part of the reason why I took my show 5 days a week, because I wanted to build that catalog really quickly. And so I started reaching out to people like all day every day, and so I'm just lining them up. And so I can totally speak to that. I completely relate to what you're saying.
And I think with 5 days too, it's like, look, it's like anything else, right? Like, the more you do something, the more you become an expert at it, or it's like easier, right? So it does add up very quickly when it is 5 days a week. I totally agree. Like, the other day I looked and I'm like, man, like if I was doing 2 days, it would take me forever to get to this many shows. And it's just,
621.
yeah. And that doesn't include the Patreon shows so it just becomes like, the more you do anything, just you don't think about it. You're like, oh, wow. Like this used to take me an hour. Now it takes me 10 minutes. Like that's
Right.
really just the way it's supposed to work. So it's all good.
Do you find reality stars are more guarded or more anxious to share?
I think that they are more not, it's different. They're more high maintenance in a lot of ways behind the
Mm,
scenes, is what they are.
I can
You get
completely
these
imagine.
big actresses and really famous people, and they're just lovely. You know what I mean? They just
Yep.
understand. And then you get these reality people where it's like, they think,
I don't get out of bed for less than $10,000.
yeah, and then like calling afterwards and you want edits. No, we're not editing this out. Like I don't know why you said this if you don't want it out there. Sorry. It's
That
not
part.
happening. So you get a lot of drama before and after. Like on air, they're probably as revealing as others. I don't know if there's such a difference, but it's the high maintenance associated with them before and after that is greater than any actual real celebrity that I've experienced.
Mm. Do you have a favorite interview that you're willing to share?
I think, I have favorites. Like if I didn't overthink it, I have people like Janice Dickinson.
Uh,
I love,
Icon.
right, like
Icon.
icon, and she doesn't care and she just says whatever is on her mind. So her, Susan Lucci from All My Children, another icon.
Yes. Yes,
There was
yes.
no reason, she wasn't promoting anything. We just had like a mutual friend in common, and it's one of these things. And like she was just amazing. Those are, I mean, and I had Anne Heche before I had
Ooh.
her this year. I mean, not
Mhm.
right before she passed away, but in the beginning of the year. And I mean, it was released probably like a month ago. She was just wonderful. Those are, maybe without overthinking it, the three that kind of come to the top of my mind.
That's amazing. Rest in peace, Dan Hayes.
Yeah, and she was great, and just like, but like Janice Dickinson at the time was by far my favorite, and then Susan Lucci was probably right up there.
I've seen the Janice interview because when I saw it was Janice, I was like, oh, I'm watching this. I'm watching the clips on YouTube. I'm listening to this on Apple. I'm listening to all of this. I was so
Janice
excited.
is just everything.
Yes, always. Well, I still watch Janice Dickinson's show about the agency on YouTube all the time.
It was
Such
a
a great
great
show.
show, and we like cover that in the interview. I mean, and that's what I love. I love when someone checks like so many boxes. So like with Janice, it's like, okay, you're the world's first supermodel. Let's talk about Gigi and Bella and Kendall. You had
Yes.
this reality show, the Janice Dickinson Modeling Agency, before reality TV was a thing. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about America's Next Top Model and Tyra and Housewives. And so like when it's someone like Janice that like checks so many boxes, that's like my favorite type of interview because you could just cover so much.
Absolutely. How do you prepare for an interview?
I mean, usually, and that's where, I mean, I've gotten it down. I mean, that's something I have to do it myself. I could never have someone do it for me. Like, I really,
Same.
depending upon who it is, it takes a minute, and I think because it's a business now for me, I
Hmm.
definitely interview people that I don't necessarily know or like or care about. The majority are on brand, but sometimes I'll interview, I'll be like, wow, this person's on brand for my audience, but I'm not a fan or I don't know anything about them. So
Mm,
sometimes it's really, but putting that aside, there are just people like a Janice or a Susan Lucci where I'm like, this could be a once in a lifetime thing. So I just want to put more time into this, but
completely
normally
get that.
I start with like Wikipedia and I just start going from there. And like one thought leads to another. And it's really, I'm just in my computer. It's just Google, Google, Google. And then, like, of course, certain things about certain people and you want to ask certain things. But I really prepare by over preparing. And I really just
Same.
put so much down. And then I look and I'm like, okay, because I also deal with like agents and managers and networks. So a lot of times it's not carte blanche. A lot of times it's like you have 30 minutes and that's it. It's not an hour, it's not 45. And it's really so, I mean, an hour interview is actually easier to do than 30 minutes.
Yes, God.
It is.
Yes,
So,
God.
right. So a lot of times it's like I over prepare and then I'm going down of like, all right, these are the B-list questions and like these are the ones I must get in there. And you come with an agenda. So when there's a time limit, you really have to go fast. And but that's kind of how I prepare. It's like I over prepare, I get everything down. I kind of talk to myself as I'm preparing. I actually pretend I'm asking the question. That is
Yeah.
really my process. It always is.
I relate. Yes, I do know. 100%. What's been the most impactful sentiment you've taken from an interview?
I think, like, look, so many interviews are just phoned in where you're like, oh, you're so just giving me canned answers. And then other ones you're like, I'm so in the moment with this person and this is so real. I mean, I love interviews where someone has like just such a positive view of life and they're like, I just had one. It was someone who I don't really want to get into because, like, I hate to say the guests before they come up, but like,
Okay.
I love also like anyone that like I had like a lot of like the 80s child stars like Mackenzie Phillips and Corey Feldman. Like I love when someone I just love certain topics. I love talking about fame. I love talking about the addiction of fame. I love when people talk addiction. So like Mackenzie and like anyone who's like recovering and like went there and like really had to go to rehab and was like known for it. Like Mackenzie Phillips is known for her bad behavior on drugs and Corey Feldman.
Right.
I love when I get serious. I love this
real stories.
Yeah, I love that type of stuff. I do. And a lot of times you have someone coming up where they have that and you're like, you can't mention this or whatever. But, a lot of times, listen, you could mention most things, but I love like the real stories where someone just has been to hell and back and everyone knows it and you get to go there.
I totally relate to that. I've done a lot of interviews. Well, I've done one, well, nowhere near as many as you, but for launching this podcast about 2 months ago, I've done quite a few interviews at this point. But I have found that the interviews that I remember or the ones that stick out to me or the ones that I go back to are always the ones where there's really a deeper story that's just attached to their reality TV. Like there's one interview that I did where this woman relates to housewives because of what Kelsey did to Camille. She went through basically the same thing with her ex-boyfriend, and then she basically followed Camille's story because she was grieving that relationship as Camille was at the same time. Like it was just I've heard a lot of deep shit come from people's experience with reality TV, and it really kind of made me lean into the interview part of this podcast. And I was like, oh, this is where the action is. This is where I need to be.
I think so. I think so. And it's really interesting getting to know these people, right? Because you really do have a real conversation. And then when you speak to the person again, you're like, regardless of what's going on in the world, you're like, that was real and that was authentic. It was real.
Yes. And I've had a lot of real talks, and I appreciate every single person that comes on this show because, like, they just eventually feel free to just open up about whatever. And I'm like, I don't really, prod or ask too deep a question, just depending on who it is. But, like, I've really had some really extensively deep conversations on here. Now, how do you navigate an interview that's just not giving you what you need from it? And how do you pivot?
I mean, there are definitely interviews where, and I always wonder, I'm like, can people tell? Sometimes they can, and can the person tell? Like, you just sometimes, like, I had this situation recently too. Now, it's really strange because when the interview was over, her team told my team that she absolutely loved this experience. And I'm like, is she just like overcompensating or is that true? But I
Mhm.
felt the whole time like there was no tension or we just weren't connecting, you know? And I feel like when that happens, it's really like I ask a question, I get an answer. Okay, now there's silence. I ask another question. Like, I've
Yeah.
had those where you ask a question, you get an answer, silence. And that went on the whole interview. And a lot of times it's like, look, I mean, I feel when that happens and when it's happening, it's like sometimes you can pull the person out of it and you get a little something more, and then other times you're like it's not even a lost cause. You're like, this person has a big name behind them, they have a lot of fans, someone's gonna love this, but you're like, you look, we're
It's
like,
just not happening.
yeah, like we're 35 minutes in, it's just not gonna happen. You mean, you say this to yourself and you're like, that's okay, it just is what it is. And then you get through it. And then sometimes I feel guilty afterwards. I'm like, I mean, but look, you don't give up. Like, I even have people leave comments like, oh my God, I could tell this was painful, but good for you for hanging. I mean, look, like the train has left the station, right? So
Yeah.
we're not gonna pivot. We're not gonna like end this in the middle of it. I mean, I feel like sometimes, look, I have to get things from someone. So
Mhm.
when you have these awkward questions, I have there is a style to my interviews. Like, let's start slow and like I gotta get to this really tense question. And you're gonna be
Mhm.
having a great time with me. And like 35 minutes in, you're not gonna be happy when I ask this. But hopefully I have worn you down. I have stripped away the layers. You're a little more relaxed. We're having a moment. So sometimes when you ask that, you just like, I clench my fists a lot under the table of like, this is the one. Like, this is such an inappropriate question, David. It's so inappropriate. Like, so, I mean, I don't blame someone, but you have to ask. This is what everyone wants. So you kind of get to
Yeah.
that. Like, this answers your question about pivoting, and then you ask another one. And sometimes you just can tell you get one, two, three, four. You just read the room and when it's like, okay, like you got what you wanted. You kind of
Mhm.
have two more in you, but it's time to pivot. And then now, like, you just know when it's like, this is enough, like you gotta pivot because this person's about to tell you off after two more questions.
How much focus do you put on questions that are, this is what the audience wants to hear, and how much focus do you put on questions that are, this is what I want to know?
I feel I probably put more emphasis on, and my show gets a lot of press, so now that's become a thing because now I know how to
Mhm.
interview to get a headline and being paid six. And so I
Right.
feel like that's a third element. So I feel like it's, what does the audience want to know? What do I have to ask? Like, what is going to be the headline? Like with Janice Dickinson, love her, you love her. The bottom line is she's probably not getting a headline on her own. So going into that, I said, it's very simple. Like the headline from this interview is Gigi and Bella and Kendall. Period. The end. So I need a quote about them. Now, I said to myself, if it was positive, if she said Gigi and Bella and Kendall are brilliant supermodels, that it doesn't have to be negative. It's like you have to know what question to ask. That I don't care what your answer is. It could be good, it could be bad. The answer to this question is a headline. If she said they were great, it would have been world's first supermodel puts her stamp of approval on Gigi and Bella and Kendall. I mean, she didn't. She trashed them, and then that became a thing. But it's kind of like, so it's really three categories of like, what do people want to know? Do I have some self-indulgent questions? And what do I have to ask to get a headline? That's really like with Janice, like the JDMA, like Janice Dickinson Modeling Agency. I put that in like the self-indulgent category of like,
Yeah.
I don't know. No one's really, they want to hear about next top model and all this other stuff. I want to know about that because, like you, I was a huge fan of that show, and so
Yep.
and I like to, if it's my first time with someone, I like to cover a lot of things in their career. But
Mhm.
like that was like, I want to know about this experience, so I'm gonna ask. I mean, we're not going to spend 30 minutes on it, that was an example. The Kendall stuff was like, I had to get my headline. And then there was all the other stuff about, which with Janice, I wanted to know everything, but like Next Top Model and Tyra and all that nonsense. So you kind of have like 3 categories, and it's kind of like I cover them all usually.
That makes perfect sense. Genius. What
You know,
genius?
and the headline will always be part of it. It will always be like, and look, there's some people, it's not, there are just certain interviews where I go in wanting my headline and you don't get it. I mean, so that happens where you just you get like some 1 sentence answer and you're like, this is nothing. Like, I didn't get it. And I don't know if the other person is aware of what I'm trying to do, but like so that happens. And then there's other interviews where you go and you're like, there is no headline in this. This is because I interview people for self-indulgence also, like where you're like, no one's going to listen to this. I mean, that's the beauty of 5 days a week, is that you can have a, like, this person is some, you know, star from the 80s and they're not like a big name, and no one's, you know, a lot of people are going to feel the nostalgia, but others are not going to know who this is. And like, I don't care. I'm thrilled to interview this person. So, but
and I'm freaking the fuck out.
Right, I'm freaking out, and I don't care if no one listens, you know, because this is just for me. So you have that too. So it's really, that's the beauty of 5 days a week. But then there's also, what I was going to say is, there's like people like that where you go in and you're like, there's no headline here. This is like, it's not of the moment. And then by the end of the interview, you're like, oh my God. Like, I interviewed her first season, Charlie Burnett from Vanderpump Rules. I was like, not excited. I was like, that was when we had all these new people. She was the smallest one on the show. Nobody cared. I was like, whatever. And it turned out she was like, went on and on about Stassi and Katie and Kristen and how they were mean girls and they wouldn't speak to her through, like, during, and it was like, it became this whole thing of like the hazing of the newbie. And like, when I was done, I was like, this is like crazy. And it turned out to be viral press, a blockbuster episode, one of my biggest to date. Like, it just became a whole thing. And I was like, see, you know, that's where it's like, what you think is going to be a blockbuster sometimes isn't. And the interview you think is like, you're not even excited for, it turns out to be like one of the best ones ever. So I swear, sometimes you have expectations and it's exactly what you think. And other times you're like, man, I just, you know, why did I ever underestimate this person? I feel so bad.
I absolutely get that. Now, I remember, I think your first interview with Kim D a couple years ago.
It was
I
a
think it was
long
maybe
time
in,
ago.
I think it was maybe in 2020. I think, because I remember it like specifically saying it's like her first time on the show. How did you develop such a close chemistry on the show, where she's like on the show all the time now, and I love it.
Well, we were friends before that first interview, so I already knew her, and so we were friends. Like, look, it just happened organically. We just became friends. And the thing is, that's another thing. Besides my 5 days a week, I have my Patreon Saturdays, which is, you know, what people pay for. And so I don't know, like, Saturdays, Patreon didn't really have its own identity. There were different things I was trying out on there. And, you know, of course, that's the paid day a week. The goal is to have people subscribe. And I don't know, like, I'm friends with Kim. It just kind of started, like, we were kicking, like, she was on the show a bunch and we were kicking around, like, I don't know, she was like, I'm like, you talk so much about Jersey. I'm like, you should come on once a week. And she's like, I should. And I was like, really? Really? You're really going to do this once a week? Because Kim says she's going to do something a lot of times and then she doesn't follow through. Love you, Kim. But that's nothing I wouldn't say to her face.
Right.
And so, like, look, I was like, let's not bill this as every Saturday because I don't buy it. And then she was there one Saturday, and then she was there another Saturday. And I was like, oh, and like, it's really become the most popular day of the week. You know, she, like, when Jersey went off the air, I was like, so, I mean, she really came on to recap Jersey every week while it was on, which makes sense because she knows a lot of these people and she has a lot to say. Then when it went off the air, she was like, well, I'm having fun. I mean, I stay home. I'll do it. I'm like, well, we can talk about Jersey every week. There's some other, you know, there's stuff going on when it's not filming, but we have to pick something that's on currently. And that's when she was like, well, I'll do Beverly Hills. Like, all right, so you have to watch Beverly Hills every night, that it's on. So that's kind of was this past season. Now she's doing Salt Lake. And by the time that ends, Jersey's going to be back. So it just became Saturdays with Kim D. Like, and that's an example of like sometimes in business and running a podcast or anything, you have to listen to the audience, right? So like that is the most popular day of the week. People have flocked to my Patreon because of Kim D. So yeah, girlfriend, you're gonna stay here. Like, you know what I mean? It's like it's not even a matter of like, do I want to do something? It doesn't matter. Saturdays is with Kim because this makes business sense. So we're gonna keep this. So it's just sometimes you have to listen to like what shows are rating, and like I always look at the charts and the downloads just to know. You don't have to get so caught up in it, but you have to listen to the people when it's such a wide number of people that are wanting something. You're like, okay, so great. This is the route we're going to go. That decision was easy.
Nice. Have you ever felt the need to hold someone accountable that you're interviewing?
Yeah, a lot of the time. I mean, that I think is more with housewives in reality people than celebrities. But yeah, I mean, I go there. Like, I will ask the questions, and you push. And then after one or two times, sometimes you just realize, like, I know the truth. And apparently, you don't say this, but you're like, I know the truth, but apparently we're not going to get that here today. Like, some people just won't give you the real deal, but you go there and you push, but a lot of times you get a real answer and you're like, thank you. Like I love asking people to admit they were fired. All these people, I mean, it's different now. People are starting to just say, like, I was elected, but all these people that make their statement about like this, I'm like, you were fired. You didn't quit the house. So I love just like, look, like, let's just have like a real chat.
Absolutely. Based on your definition, what's the difference between a controversial housewife or reality star and a problematic housewife and reality star?
I think the problematic is when it just becomes like, to me, it's like, you look at like what just happened at BravoCon with Jennifer Aiden and Gorgas. Like, to me, problematic is when like it is a job. And so I think a great housewife controversial is when you just do it all on air. Like, I don't know if there's really too much you can do on air. Like, you're filming, that's the job, go for it. I think it becomes like too much when now you're not filming and like you're doing things like throwing a drink or getting into like a scuffle at BravoCon. Like, that's not the time or place. And like, I don't understand, like you're not being paid to cause drama now. That's when it's like, and also why are you
real?
Yeah. And why are you letting this like spill over into your real life? Like, who cares?
To that point, how often do you have people, and I'm sure this is probably more housewives than not, how often do you have people come on your show with a specific narrative now that your show is so huge and everybody knows beyond the velvet rope, everybody knows David? How often do you have people come on your show now with a specific intention to direct a certain narrative when it comes to their interview?
What do you mean? Like, just as far as like
they come on the show and like maybe after they'll say or like before they'll say, hey, don't ask me this, I only want to talk about this, or try to basically shape how the interview is gonna go.
I mean, it definitely happens. Like, I would say it doesn't happen as often as you think. And that's where it's like a home run is you have an hour and good luck. And it's me and the person, and we're having a lovely talk. And there's two people. Like, what a lot of people I don't think realize is there ain't two people on the Zoom lots of the time. A lot of the time there are, but a lot of the time, this Zoom that I am on now has a network. The Fox network is listening. Bravo is listening. CBS is, they have a manager, an agent, a publicist. So, so the home run is here's an hour, good luck. And a lot of times, like, you don't know. You just get on and you're like, okay, we're 3 minutes into this. Yes, this is a home run. Nobody is on. I mean, it's not like the person's there and you don't know. I mean, you know, sometimes you're told. So normally, I guess, you get carte blanche with no do not discuss things most of the time. Most of the time. A lot of times, look, I mean, it's not like someone's giving you a list of here are 13 things you can't ask, but a lot of times there are 1 or 2 things you can't ask. And if it's ridiculous, then I will push back. Like, here's an example of like, her people reached out to me, Black China. I thought this was a joke. It's like an account on Instagram with no followers. And it's like, I'm Black China's PR. Would you want to have her on? I'm like, okay, this person is a crazy stalker. This is not... Right. So I was like, sure, but can you please email me? So then they emailed me for some Gmail account. I'm like, oh my God, this doesn't help. This really, but look, like I say, let's go down this road. Let's just assume this is real. And then after going back and forth a few times, I'm like, I think this is fucking real. Then they started getting into, well, listen, you can't. And then I realized like, oh, this is real. Wow. Okay. So this person was like, they were like, you can't ask any questions about the Kardashians. And I'm like, listen, let's back the car up.
Right. Put it in park, sis.
Right. I'm like, listen, I think I understand what you're saying. There's a lawsuit, her and Rob and Chris, and then we moved on from that. I'm like, I don't want to ask anything about the lawsuit. I don't need to know who did what and you and Rob and who, I don't need to know any of that. They're like, okay, so like what? I'm like, I want to ask current stuff. And they were like, what are you talking about? I want to know what she thinks about Kim and Pete. Because these are the headlines, not who pushed who. And the headline is, what does, like, I want a quote from Blac Chyna. I wish Kim the best of, and it went viral. I'm like, I want to know what she thinks about Khloe, always taking back, these guys, and Tristan. That's what I want to know. And I want to know about Travis Barker and Courtney. What does she think? And they were like, that's what you want to know? I'm like, yeah, the same way I'd want to know from anyone walking down the street. It doesn't matter. Whatever Blac Chyna says, whatever her answer is about, Kim and Pete, that is going to be viral. And it was. I'm like, so I know what I need for, and they were like, okay, you can ask 2 Kardashian questions. I'm like, that's all I need. Great. So sometimes, and I'm like, look, she's in a lawsuit. I don't want to ruin her life. I don't even want to know about that. So sometimes if you're given a no, and depending upon who it is, like I really wanted to interview Blac Chyna. So if they said no, I still would have said yes. I mean, I don't know, no disrespect to her. Yeah. And that's the other thing. I have a way of getting things in. You can play good cop, bad cop and be like, well, I would never ask you about this, blah, blah, and then say it. And that's the other thing. Normally, I find it's not the person, it's a team. And when you get the person on, they're willing to actually answer it. But I do push back. But the majority of time, you're able to just ask whatever you want. It's, there are times where it's like, I'm trying to think of an example where I've just turned, I have an example. I'm trying to think of an example where I actually turned an interview down, which is very rare. Very rare. This is full circle where we started. So I was approached by Lo Bosworth's people recently to interview her.
Whoa.
Well, listen, and it's not going to happen. So it's like she has a new book. It's all about your gut health and your vagina health and women's health. And I was like, we are going to promote this book so heavily, of course. But like,
Bosworth, Queen B.
Right. But they literally were like, she doesn't want to talk about Lauren and I'm like, okay, but like, fine. Right. But like, we're going to talk about the experience on the hills. And they're like, no. She doesn't want not one mention or question. You could say this is Lo from the hills, not one question about the hills. And I'm like, listen, I'm canceling. I mean, unless you want to have questions, I can't sit here and talk about women's health. Like, we're just not that podcast. And I'm like, by the way, listen to my chat with Ardrina. Ardrina Patridge came on to promote her new book. We promoted the book.
I love that interview.
Oh my God. That was one of my favorites. Loved. And she's the sweetest. So that was an example of like, we promoted the book, but I got what I wanted. I mean, that's how it works. Everyone gets what they want. And they
Actually,
were like, yeah.
oh, actually, you're the reason how I fell down that rabbit hole of like figuring out all these people from the hills are doing podcasts, because I listened to her interview on your show, and then I was like, what's she doing now?
Yeah.
And I found her podcast, and then Kristen was on, and then I thought her and Steven had a podcast, and then I found Whitney, and she has a whole YouTube channel, and I went down a complete like 3-week rabbit hole of just watching her and her husband. Shout out to them.
So there's an example, like, you know, of like, we got everyone, and that's how it works. But right, no, I mean, it's rare. I can't even think of another example, but that's one example where it just was like, this just isn't worth it. Like, I don't know what we're supposed to do here otherwise.
That's crazy. It's like, how do I? Yeah,
I mean,
I completely get that.
Strange. It's strange. And like, first of all, I mean, I need like 20 minutes only. I mean, no one wants to hear about this. We would have, and I prepared a whole show. I'm like, we would have really plugged the book, but there's no way like, you don't want me to mention the fact that she was on the hills or talk about that experience at all?
That's how.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's an example where I was just like, oh, this interview isn't happening. Like, I mean, I'm sorry. Like, no hard feelings. I'm not angry, you know, but like, we're just beyond that here behind the velvet rope. We're just past that. And like, it's good. It's like, know your self-worth. Know your self-worth. Nothing's going to happen. The world isn't going to explode. My show's going to go on just fine. You know, it's like, of course, I would love to talk to her, but not without being able to talk about the hills for at least 15 minutes out of an hour.
Yeah, because I have a couple low Bosworth questions about the hills myself. Anyway, why do you think the Bravo fandom is seemingly the most toxic fandom in reality TV?
Isn't that a good question? And thank you for saying that, because it's 100% true.
That's why I'm here.
It's 100% true. I mean, I have people on from all, and also the talent. I mean, I am selling Sunset, Bling Empire. This is Netflix. Netflix is national. These are huge, huge, huge shows. The people from the reality TV shows on Netflix are darling, first of all. And second of all, the fans come on, they leave comments, they leave some positive, they leave some negative. We move on. It doesn't go there. It's so strange to me. It's like, this Netflix is bigger than Bravo ever will be. And these fans come and they're wonderful and they disagree and they argue and we're all happy. I don't know. I have never in my entire life seen something like this. I don't understand it. We have Jersey Shore. We've had The Hills. There's so many other reality shows, even like ones that go low, 90 Day Fiancé and this, and even people point to Drag Race. I don't think so. I don't think the Drag Race fans are even close to the Bravo fans as far
They're extremely racist, but it's never been this bad.
It's never been this bad. Yeah, because I've had a lot of the queens on, you know, and they're racist and they've got a lot of other issues, but it's not like this. I agree with you. I think the Bravo fandom is the most toxic, nasty group of people. And I don't engage. I mean, it's not, I'm a content creator. I'm a business person here. So I don't understand it. I wish I did. I don't know if it's the subject matter. But I mean, look 90 Day Fiancé is, I mean, other reality shows are dragging people. I don't know. I've never seen anything like it, and especially Housewife fans. That's really, it's really, I don't, most toxic group of people. It's very strange. Right?
It's extremely I've Drag Race was my close second because that fan base is extremely racist. But I've never gotten to a point. See, the difference between Drag Race and Housewives is the problem is with Drag Race, it's strictly the fandom, not necessarily the content that's on the screen. So I've never felt the need to stop watching Drag Race, with the exception of occasional transphobia from RuPaul. But um,
That's
there's
okay.
been a couple things, right? You know, we all grow and learn. But but I've never felt the need to just stop watching the show because of the show. It's always been the fans. Whereas with Housewives, it's the stuff that they're doing on the show coupled with the fan experience.
Yes. Yes. And I mean, the housewives, oh, I guess the queens get into it on social media too, but it's not the same.
It's never been anything like this. Like,
No.
and I've complained about the house. I've complained about the Drag Race fandom, but even like, it's never been anything like Housewives.
I agree. I agree. I don't understand it at all. It's really, I don't know. And I don't know. I mean, I think the housewives add to it. I think, I mean, Bravo doesn't care. They don't care. As long as you don't break that fourth wall, you know what I mean? And talk about behind the scenes production. They don't care if these women knock each other out. They actually probably secretly like it, right?
More than likely.
So yeah. Yeah, I just don't. I wish I understood, because I find it so strange myself. It's like a phenomenon that I've looked into, and I just can't get any, like, you know what I mean? The more I look, the more confused I get. But they go there, and it's just, I mean, they'll keep the conversation. I mean, you look at my Instagram page. There are things about Kathy versus Rinna. I mean, one of them I think has 2,700 comments on my Behind the Velvet Rope Instagram page. I'm like, just people screaming at each other, team this, team that. I'm like, you realize none of these people know who you are, nor ever will. And just because you at them, they're not gonna. I don't know if it's insecurity or you didn't get enough love as a child. It's like, I don't know. I just don't know. But everyone's like, I got my voice, and here we go.
Very that. How do you think we as content creators can contribute to the maturity of the fan base experience on social media? And do you think we even have that responsibility?
What, to like try to keep it positive and bring it in that direction?
Yeah, to like try to curate a more positive experience within the fan base, because I think even like with the stuff that goes on the show, it's even more elevated by the experience that the fans are having on social media. That's where the root of the toxicity truly lies, to me.
Totally. Totally. I mean, that's like when Ebony was on my show. She was on many times, Ebony K. Williams. She was like, I didn't realize this until she said it. She's like, look back at my season. There was no real drama on the season between me and any of the women. She's like,
Right.
every problem I have, like the reason we are where we are is because of when I started doing interviews. These women didn't like what I was. So her point is like all the drama between her and her castmates didn't even happen on air. It all happened on social media so it is true. Like that is where the real toxicity lies. Now, of course, like Beverly Hills this season was an exception. New Jersey's an exception with Teresa and Melissa. But in the majority, a lot of it is like B-level drama on the show, and then it gets escalated to A+ on social media. It's a really weird dynamic. I don't really know if we have a obligation. I don't think so. And I don't think that, like, I don't mind any comment on my Instagram. Like, you can be team this, team that. You can say, David, I disagree with you. You're this, you're that. When it gets really nasty is when I'll just block you. Again, just like with the low situation, I think I block like 1 out of every 500 people. It takes a lot for me to block. I mean, just today, someone told me that I was as ugly outside as I am inside. So I'm like, okay, I think this person should be blocked. Like when it goes to like, and I'm not going to engage, you know what I mean? But I don't mind to have your opinion, fight it out on my page. I won't really engage because I really don't have a side often, because I know how the sausage is made. And so I really judge you only when I know you and when we speak on my podcast one-on-one. Then I make my judgment. Short of that, I really don't get outraged by what I see on the TV. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I don't really think we have an obligation, and I don't really know. It's almost like a moot point. Like, I think you could have every obligation you want. You're not going to stop this toxicity, even if every content creator. It just, I don't know how to reel it in. I just don't know.
Yeah, like each content creator could come together and do a "We Are the World" Housewives podcast, and they still would talk shit about it.
Exactly. That's the thing. And so I just don't know. But I do agree that it's gotten completely out of control. And I don't know how we got here. And I think it's the most toxic group of fans out there. I agree with.
What's the biggest lesson you've learned from reality TV?
I think the biggest lesson I have learned is, oh God, am I really quoting Lisa Rinna? God fucking help me.
Right.
I mean, God help me here on a Sunday morning with coffee.
On this beautiful Sunday morning.
I mean, I feel own it because, and I'm not saying Lisa owns it. I'm just saying because if you think about it, like, okay, let's just, right. Like I was just thinking this the other day, like, first of all, I feel that, and I feel, I've said this a million times. If I got chosen to be on Housewives or any reality TV show, I would be there for 10 years because I know exactly what to do. And B, never take anything personally. And C, I would hire a private investigator if I was chosen to go on a reality show. And I would have them look into my background. And I would say, bring me everything. Now, first of all, I've done nothing illegal, nor would I ever done anything illegal because you always get caught. Second of all, there's nothing racist or anything out there that I've said, but it doesn't matter. Non-things become something. So bring me everything. I want all of it out there, and then I'm going to be ready. And so the thing is, what I've learned, to answer your question, is own it and admit it. Because, like, think about it. If Rinna, then the person has no power. So if Rinna says, or whoever, Denise, you slept with Brandy. Yes, I did. Okay, well, we have no story here now. We have no story. Right. I did. Like, okay, so like, where do you want to go with this? I slept with her. It was great. Next.
Now what?
So, right, like, Melissa, I mean, did you get on the show behind Teresa's back? Yes, I did.
Yep.
Teresa never would have let me on the show. She's jealous. I wanted on this show. Sorry, I'm in New Jersey. It was a housewife show. I deserve to be on. I did. I went behind her back. Great. Guess what? That whole thing that we're still talking about how many years later would have been over with. So just whatever it is, take the power back. Admit it. So I think that applies to life as well. That is what I've learned. If someone calls you on something and it's going to be a big deal, just admit it and squash it. And like, I have the power. Yeah, this is actually embarrassing, or yeah, I cheated on my husband with, Brandy or whatever it is. I would rather, like, you are not going to hold something over me. No way. So I don't want to deal with this. This is very embarrassing. I have a family, I have friends, but I will throw myself into the fire and embarrass myself for whatever it is that I did that you would like to bring out and hold over me rather than go down this road. I think that's the lesson. And it doesn't just apply to reality. It's for life. Just take the power back and don't let someone have anything on you. Just, sure, I did this. All right. As we've learned from reality and Housewives, it all blows over no matter what you did.
Eventually.
Eventually it will blow over. Look, I think the world is softening on Erica Jane this season. Love her. I know. I think maybe that's just in my own mind because every time I say that, people are like, I don't know about that.
Right.
Well, I think a little bit, but I don't know if it's her. I think it's just that everyone despises Rinna so much. But yeah, like everything does have a life cycle and blow over or subside to some extent. So that's maybe one of the things I've learned, and just own it. Yeah, I did this next. I mean, that's why, like, I was just having this conversation for an episode coming up this week. Like, say Denise came back or someone came back gunning for Rinna. I mean, is there any way to really take down Rinna? She admits everything. Yeah, I'm a mess. I did this. Sure. I don't know. I mean, unless
we could finally talk about the husband.
Right. Like maybe she has some deep, dark secret there that's going to come. But I mean, she seems to look, if someone really wanted to take her down, they'll spend time looking into her family. That's the only thing that gets to her, right?
Or call Nicolette Sheridan.
Or call Nicolette Sheridan. Exactly.
My last question for you is, what advice do you have for me as an up and coming podcaster in this space, as the veteran, as the OG, as the one who's doing the things of the things and setting the bars and the trends? Because you really are like the biggest person in this space. Like, to me, like you are like the biggest podcaster like in this Housewives Bravo reality world. Like everybody comes to David.
They thank you for that. They do. And so what was your actual question? Sorry.
What's your advice for me?
I think, like, you are you, right? So whatever you do, whatever you're doing, no one else could do it that way. So I think that the biggest mistake a lot of these Bravo and reality podcasters make is like they look around too much, right? Like you shouldn't be looking around at what anyone else is doing, right? Like you should be looking around at your brand, your show, what works for you. And really your only competition is yourself. So
Right.
it shouldn't be like this person got that interview or this or that. I mean, I've seen it firsthand. All these other people, they get into a lot of this and that. And I just think you should like stick with it. I mean, you love doing it, you said. So like, as long as you love doing it, all the rest will fall into place, and you shouldn't look to others and why are they there and why are they at this point. Like FOMO is just cut all of that out. Like the party is where you are at and you're only in competition with yourself. So you really should only focus on where you were, 3 months ago, 6 months ago. Not really all that other stuff is just external noise, and just stick with it if you like it, because I think it all eventually falls into place.
Thank you so much. I received that 750,000%. This has been amazing. This has been impactful. This has been insightful, informative. All of the really big words that start with I. Um, Thank you so much for giving me your time.
I will come back anytime you want. You ask great questions.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Like I am one of those people, like you said, who over prepares as well. So I really have as many questions as I asked you today. A there's just as many questions that I haven't asked you still on the page. But I really wanted to make sure that I got the ones that I knew that I had to have an answer to the top of the list, just like you said about having the headline. So listening to you, it really made me feel like, okay, I'm on the right track. And so I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And I look forward to having you back. Please come back.
I will come back anytime. You ask really good questions. So whatever you didn't ask me today, feel free. We'll do this again in like, a month or so.
Sweet. The questions that I didn't ask was more so just like stuff about specific housewives stuff, just like random fan questions. There was a game of like this or that
That's
I
all
always play on
fine.
the show. Yeah, like you can like come back and shoot the shit.
I would love that. Really. We can shoot the shit all day and play all the games.
Yay! Thank you so much. Let everybody know where they can find you. I'm sure they already know, but for the few in the back that don't, remind the children where they can get Behind the Velvet Rope.
I will. And when this comes out, tag me and I will repost it all over. So really, you
This will
can
be
listen.
out tomorrow.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, there
Yeah.
you go. Tag me and I'll post it over. You can listen to Behind the Velvet Rope on Apple, Spotify, anywhere you find your podcasts. On Instagram, we are at Behind Velvet Rope. There's no the. We're on TikTok, Twitter. And really, it's a 5-day-a-week interview show with some gossip thrown in there. And I interview really actresses, actors, and the majority of what everyone wants from me is Bravo, Bravo, Bravo. So there is always one housewife every week at a bare minimum. So hopefully people will listen.
Work. I'm sure that this is going to be. Thank you so much. Because listen, everyone who I've interviewed on this show or has commented on this show has all asked me to get you on this show.
Oh my
so,
God.
so
That's amazing.
you're a highly requested interview on this show. So I know that my audience is going to be very happy to hear this. Thank you so, so much.
Well, I am humbled to you and to your amazing audience. So, but definitely keep in touch, and I definitely will
Likewise.
come back in a few months.
Absolutely. I would be more than happy to slide in the DMs, but platonically.
At any time, I check the DMs, as you know.
Sweet. Talk to you soon, love. You enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You as well. Bye, love.
Bye.